So algebraic fractions in C3. Basic rule of thumb, if you see a quadratic, factorise it. That makes it much easier. Also watch out for common factors, not just quadratics. They're very easily missed. So 8x minus 32, take the 8 out. 6x squared minus 15x, again it's two terms, so it'll have a common factor this time. I can take the 3x out, so I'm left with 2x minus 5. So make sure that you factorise what you can. Quadratics are easy to factorise, but people often miss common factors. So in terms of key learning, algebraic fractions, if you see a quadratic, factorise it. So multiplying fractions, make sure you cancel any common factors in the numerator and denominator before you start, because otherwise the algebra becomes very difficult. So I've got a common factor here to cancel, x plus 2, x minus 3. So step 1, factorise any quadratics. Step 2, cancel any common factors. Division, same as multiplication, but you flip the second fraction, then you factorise, see if you can cancel, and then multiply. Adding fractions, rule of thumb for adding fractions that you need to think of. If you're adding fractions, remember that you need to think common denominator. So as soon as you're adding fractions, common denominator. You might also see this written as express as a single fraction. So if it says express as a single fraction in its simplest form, that's basically another terminology for adding the fraction. So 4 steps. Factorise where possible, always makes it easiest. Find the simplest common denominator, step 2. Multiply the numerators so that you get the common denominator, and then multiply out any numerator and simplify. So as an example, here we've got this. Step 1 is always to factorise where you can. So my first step, factorise. This doesn't factorise, so step 1, factorise. Step 2, spot the simplest denominator. So I've got 2t plus 1, t plus 3. So my simplest common denominator is this. Step 3, multiply the numerators. So this is already over the common denominator. This one is over 2t plus 1. So I need to multiply by t plus 3. And then multiply out. Step 4 is multiply out the numerator, and where possible simplify it. So I've got 5t plus 12 minus 14 minus 12. The 12s cancel to just give me 1t. So 4 steps that you need to learn. Factorise, find the common denominator, multiply the numerators appropriately so it's over the common denominator. Don't forget to multiply the numerator and simplify where you can. You need to know when you're dividing fractions that you can split it into these parts. This is the quotient plus the remainder over the divisor. So you need to know quotient, remainder, divisor. So the quotient is the answer, if you like, to the long division, either by the bus stop method or by inspection. Make sure that you give the answer as it's required in the question, then normally tell you what form to have it in. So that's dividing by a linear factor. You can split it, do the division to get the quotient, then the remainder goes over the divisor. You'll get somewhere you have to divide by quadratic divisors as well. So the first type is where the numerator and the denominator are the same order. So the numerator is an x squared, the denominator is an x squared. So dividing by quadratic, just look at the first terms, look at the x squared terms, and that gives you the quotient. So how many times does x squared go into 2x squared? It goes twice. So your quotient is 2. Because it's over a quadratic, your remainder is of the form ax plus b. So dividing by quadratic divisor, numerator and denominator the same. Step 1, look at the x squared term to get the quotient. Step 2, write it out with unknowns where you need to find the coefficient. So write it out in full. 2x squared plus 7 over x squared plus 3x plus 1, for example. I know the quotient is 2, and then the numerator can be the form ax plus b over the divisor. I then write this as a single fraction, so go back to the 4 steps for single fractions. Factorise, find the simplest common denominator, multiply out the numerators appropriately, multiply out the numerator and simplify. So I write this as a single fraction and then compare the coefficients. So type B is where the numerator is greater than the denominator. So here I've got a cubic over a quadratic. So I look at the first term, I've got 3x cubed over 3x squared. So if I divide those, that gives me x. So I know then that my quotient is going to be of the form x at the beginning, coefficient of 1, so it's 1x, plus a constant term. So it will be x plus a for my quotient. Then because it's over a quadratic, it can be bx plus c. And again, I now rewrite that as a single fraction and compare. So I've got x plus a plus bx plus c over 3x squared plus 4. So my common denominator is that. Multiply the x plus a by 3x squared plus 4. I've then got my bx plus c. Tidy up the numerator. And when I've tidied up the numerator, I then compare. So I've got on this side 3x cubed plus 6x squared minus 2x plus 5. If I tidy up this side, I get 3x cubed plus 3a x squared plus 4x plus 4a plus bx plus c, and I compare these two things. So first of all, the 3x cubes are right. That's the bit that I got right. They're okay. They're the same. Then I've got 3ax squared on this side. I've got 6x squared on this side. So therefore 3a is equal to 6, the x squared term. Then I look at the x terms. I've got, for the x terms, I've got a 4 and a b, and on this side I've got a minus 2x. So 4 plus b is minus 2, that tells me what b is. And then the constant term on this side, I've got 4a plus c, and that's equal to 5. So 4a plus c is equal to 5. I already know what a is, so I can use that to work it out to give me the coefficient. So the key learning that you need for algebraic fractions. Algebraic fractions, always remember to factorise. Look out for common factors. If you're multiplying, always cancel first to make the numerator and denominator easier. If you're dividing, remember to flip the second fraction. Adding fractions, you need to look for a common denominator. Don't forget the phrase express as a single fraction. If you're adding, there's 4 steps. Factorise first where possible. Find the simplest common denominator. Multiply out the numerators so that they're over that common denominator. And multiply out the numerator and simplify it as far as you can. You need to know the format of a quotient, a remainder and a divisor. And then you need to know how to divide by quadratic division. Numerator and denominator the same. Look at the first term always. So you look at the first term to get your quotient. Remainder is always of the form ax plus b if it's over a quadratic. So write it with a quotient, and then ax plus b is your remainder over the divisor. Rewrite that as a single fraction so that you can then compare it to that. Same method really if your numerator is greater than the denominator, but for this time for the quotient, you look at this to get your x term, and then your quotient is of the form x plus a, and again you've got your bx plus c over your quadratic divisor. Same thing, rewrite as a single fraction, compare coefficients.